welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Today we will continue to examine the key issues driving global and regional policy directions, with a focus on the strategies, negotiations and power shifts in Syria, from the ongoing military reforms and the evolving dynamics in the Middle East to the international alliances that are being forged in pursuit of stability and security. Joining me now is Bryza, former US ambassador, and AnewZ political expert, Turkish-German University. We're welcome to Inside Politics.
Thanks very much, Anastasiya.
Thank you very much. So we can see how the situation in Syria is being changed day by day. A new government is now trying to build a new domestic and foreign policy. Let me start with a common question, Matthew. How do you see the latest developments in Syria?
Well, it's astounding how quickly things changed. The HTS was just waiting for the opportunity that arrived when Israel decimated Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria, and also pushed or weakened the Iranian forces that were in Syria. And then Russia was occupied and too weak in Syria to do anything. And so we see a completely new regime coming into play. He's saying, al-Sharaa is saying all the right things. He's winning confidence step by step of foreign countries. So far, the most senior leader who's visited him was Hakan Fidan, the Turkish foreign minister. They seem to have a very warm discussion. And there was a relatively senior U.S. diplomatic visit a few days ago in which, again, the leader of the U.S. delegation, Assistant Secretary for the Middle East, Barbara Leaf, said the conversation went well. We're going to judge al-Sharaa by his actions, but it's time to lift the reward of $10 million for anybody who would have captured or killed al-Sharaa. But the United States, like so many other countries, still designates HTS as a terror organization, and until that designation is lifted, it's very difficult for Syria to get back on its own 2 feet, I think.
But still, we can see how the United States of America is trying to manage its further relations with the new government in Syria. Let's remember what's happened in Afghanistan, for example, a couple of years ago. Despite the fact that there were a new government formed, international community tried to, let's say, isolate them from joining any kind of international missions or organizations. But here we can see the different approach. Matthew, why exactly here we can see what's happening?
Because of what I said, because al-Sharaa is saying all the right things. He's saying he wants to, he's demanding that religious minorities be respected, all their rights be respected. He's speaking as if he wants an inclusive government. He's non-sectarian, and he's called for the disarming of all militias and or terror groups, and that includes the YPG. And so everything he's saying so far sounds good. The problem is nobody knows if he's going to try to replicate the same sort of harsh and very strict regime in Idlib, where the HTS was governing. And I think al-Sharaa looks at what happened to the Taliban in Afghanistan, as you rightfully point out, and he's been saying, we don't want to be isolated like that. We need international recognition. We don't want our funds, our money to be frozen, as has happened to the Taliban regime. On the contrary, we need to attract a lot of investment to get the economy going again.
That's why just recently, if I'm not mistaken, United Kingdom allocated $63 billion for restoration process taking place in Syria. And there are some other countries who are also trying to invest in the future development of this country. So AnewZ, just recently we could observe how a high-level delegation from Turkey visited Syria. There were a number of very important issues discussed not only for 2 countries, but for the Middle East itself. What's your vision of the situation?
Well, I think the situation is much positive than, let's say, 1 month ago. So, and the picture was quite complex. Now we have a much simpler picture in front of us. In the past, Russia was involved, Iran was involved, and also all the Shia militias. So today there are less actors involved in Syria, and there are, I think, 3 challenges in front of Syria today. One is the presence of PKK and the occupation of Syrian land by PKK. So Syrian territorial integrity should be reinstated. Second one is the Israeli, both the previous occupation of Golan Heights, but also the new the occupied lands of Syria, and Israeli aggression also in Syria. The third one is, of course, building a new state with all the institutions and constitution, and also doing this by also incorporating different sects and ethnicities that is also abundant in Syria. So there are these three challenges, and I think Turkey's experience and how will be quite helpful for the new Damascus government to overcome these issues. First, the presidents of PKK, I think Trump administration will change the policy and has many times declared that Trump will withdraw troops from Syria. And it's the wise decision, because the current situation for PKK is not sustainable. Also for the United States, in order to preserve the PKK's presence in Syria, United States should invest more than what it has invested in Syria, and I think ready for this kind of engagement in Syria. The second one is regarding Israel, and I think Turkey can play a positive role here. The current Damascus government does not really or did not make any statements threatening Israel or any other neighbor, and they also already declared that they are not going to follow this kind of policy. So I think it's in Israel withdraw from the newly occupied lands, with, of course, with certain guarantees. And the Golan Heights is another question, of course. It will be a frozen conflict, I think, for a long time. A third issue is the building a new state with a new constitution. As ambassador said, the current government has already gave the right signals to the different ethnicities and the sects in Syria, and I think they also realize that managing Syria requires this kind of flexibility, because it's one can, from Lebanon. There are all these different sects and religions in Syria. So, this the attitude of imposing one's own concept or vision to Syria will backfire, and I think they realize this already. And of course, I think Turkey is playing a quite huge role here by reshaping the current Damascus government's vision with regards to the future of Syria.
Two very important moments which I would like to now listen to the opinion of Matthew Bryza. Ines mentioned more investments from the United States, which can be positively affecting the situation, the current development in Syria and forming new government. And the second issue is Israel. We know about close partnership between Israel and the United States. And by talking with some Israeli experts, I heard that what's happening now, the Israeli policy in Syria, is just temporary to guarantee to protect the state, and Israel is ready to withdraw its military forces once there is a guarantee of stability and security on the border. What's your opinion on that? Do you also support this claim, or there can be another scenario?
Well, what Ines, I think, was talking about in terms of investment was not monetary investment, but an investment by the U.S. government in the security situation. And I think that I agree with him. President Trump is eager to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. He didn't want to. He wanted to pull them all out the last time he was president. He did withdraw many, but was persuaded to keep 900, which recently grew to 2,000 around Deir ez-Zor. I think he's been very clear in saying the United States doesn't have any strategic interests really in Syria. Compared with its other strategic interests. The main U.S. concern in Syria now is the ISIS or the Daesh fighters and their families that are in prison camps that are operated by the PKK-YPG. Taking care of that problem is the number one goal of President Trump's incoming administration. And I think Turkey, which is becoming, you could say, the kingmaker in Syria, and I think in a very positive sense, maybe can work with the United States to manage that very difficult problem of the Daesh terrorists and their families still imprisoned. When it comes to Israel, that's the second major concern of the Trump administration with regard to Syria. The Trump administration very much supports Israel as the U.S.'s most important ally in the Middle East, is not against Israel seizing that territory next to the Golan Heights. So the Golan Heights was viewed by Israel for a while as a buffer zone, and now Israel seized more Syrian territory as a buffer zone to the buffer zone. Whether or not the Israeli pledge to withdraw once things settle down in Syria is going to be fulfilled is impossible to know right now. I think the Israeli intention, though, is not to occupy more Syrian territory. It just becomes a headache. Similarly, I don't think Turkey seeks to occupy territory in Syria. Turkey has legitimate security concerns based on both Daesh and the PKK, YPG. And as I said a moment ago, is seizing the opportunity, using its partners in the Syrian National Army to change facts on the ground and to get the PKK, YPG east of the Euphrates River, which has been a long-standing goal of Turkey. Similarly for Israel, it wants to make sure that there can't be another October 7th event attacking the Israeli Druze primarily in the Golan Heights. And how long Israel will think it needs to remain again in that, the newly occupied areas is impossible to say, but I am quite confident that the Trump administration will be supportive of Israel in that regard.
Quite interesting. You slightly mentioned Russia previously, and we know about the position of Russian government in Syria at the moment. There is still a question whether Russian military base will stay and continue to function in the future, or it will be closed. But what about Iran? Talking about Israel, we cannot exclude the fact that Iran is also, let's say, lost its position in Syrian government changes. Therefore, what is the future, especially because Donald Trump is coming, and we know about specific attitude of Donald Trump's administration towards Iran and the region itself here?
Yeah, well, the biggest winners out of all this, of course, are the Syrian people, but Turkey as well, and Israel to a certain extent. The big losers are Russia and Iran, and of course Hezbollah. So throughout the course of the last few weeks, Israel had been attacking Iran for a couple of years on the ground in Syria, and then as HTS was approaching Damascus, the Iranian presence, the military presence, basically ran away, flew away. Iran is it's in a terrible situation now logistically because it cannot reach Hezbollah, which has been really damaged by Israel in Lebanon. And it can't, so Iran can't get to Lebanon anymore because it's lost all of its influence in Syria. And so Iran is in a very weak position. There are debates going on in Washington and in Jerusalem about whether or not now is the time for Israel really to hit the Iranian regime once and for all and destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. My understanding is that is possible, especially with U.S. support. But I think for now, probably Washington is saying, don't do that. That's way too risky. Iran is back on its heels. It's a very unpopular regime. The economy is in big trouble. The population is increasingly angry with the Iranian regime for giving so much money to militia groups or terrorist groups like Hezbollah or Hamas and not to themselves, not to the Iranian people. So I think what we will likely see is President Trump will ratchet up sanctions again on Iran. Iran is selling about 1.4 million barrels of oil per day, or exporting about 1.4 million barrels per day. It had been at only 400,000 barrels per day in the previous Trump administration. So I think Trump is going to try to squeeze Iran's economy and then force Iran to the negotiating table and hope that then there can be a new arrangement with Iran, a different type of nuclear and strategic agreement of some sort with Tehran, if Tehran feels squeezed enough by the sanctions and by its losses in Syria.
Yes, do you also think that this situation will be developed in this way, especially because Turkey and Iran still have quite stable relations, despite the fact that two countries have different views on the many international issues? Still, we should remember about the group of three, Turkey, Iran, and Russia, who were dealing within the years to solve the issues of Syria. Therefore, what about the future position and role of Turkey when it comes to Iran in Syria, expectations from the US and other partnering organizations here?
Well, I think, of course,
Yes, please, Ines.
Okay. Well, I think Iran is the most difficult neighbor of Turkey. Of course, we have stable relations with Iran, but Iran is a difficult neighbor. One should admit this. And of course, Iran's policy of building this so-called resistant axis or Shia crescent in the Middle East caused lots of pain, problems for both local populations, Iranian population also, and it has collapsed. What we can see now, it was because not sustainable economically, militarily, and ethically. I think the most important part is ethically, it wasn't sustainable. I mean, Iran has supported Bashar Assad regime and helped the Bashar Assad regime to stay in power and massacre thousands of Syrians in Syria in the name of so-called axis of resistance. And but this, as I said, wasn't really ethically sustainable or ethically acceptable. And this policy has collapsed. That's what we can see now. And I think Iran has overstretched itself. It was following a policy, foreign policy, that wasn't really in line with its own resources. And I think Iran will lose more and more influence in the Middle East. After Syria, I think they will lose also their influence and in also other parts of Middle East. And also, I think this axis of resistance was basically axis of Iran. It was another way of building up a defense line outside of Iran, and Iran has waged wars outside in the last 2 decades. All this Iraq and Syria and Yemen has become, and Lebanon, a battlefield for Iran, but Iran was not really affected. And that was the main aim of this, I think, policy. And I do blame also United States for this also, because it was nice to open the space to Iran, Iranian, let's say, policy in Iraq. And the Americans gave the green light to this. And of course, when Iran decided to Israel with the 7th of October, and then things changed once again. And now we have a country like Syria totally in ruins. Some people are refugees, and that country needs to be rebuilt. And unfortunately, that task will be on the shoulder of mainly on Turkey. Because we are sharing 900 kilometers of border with Syria, it's also our duty and our national interest that we have a stable Syria. Turkey has paid a huge cost. I mean, financially, also we lost our soldiers in Syria. There were terror attacks. There were also financial costs, huge financial cost for Syrian refugees and military operations. And I think at the end, I think Turkey has won, but also we paid a huge price. And I think if our allies now, they realize the situation, that it's also in their interest to have a stable Syria, that I think we can build a strong cooperation between different actors and build Syria once again. And that will be, as I said, in the interest of everybody.
Matthew, I give you the floor if you would like to answer. Ines also said about the policy and some mistakes made by the United States of America. Do you want to respond on that?
Well, I don't think the United States intended Iran to take over in Iraq after the U.S. so mismanaged the whole post-war Iraq situation. It's just de facto what happened, and that was overall a huge strategic blunder by the United States. First, invading Iraq at all, and secondly, managing the post-military operation phase. It was an absolute disaster by the United States. But now we see, and especially with the Trump administration coming in, I think we'll see a much more aggressive American diplomacy, as I was saying before, squeezing Iran. And I think the last sort of member of the Axis of resistance to Houthis are not long for this world. I think we're going to see a huge attack by Israel very soon, supported by the United States. The US and UK yesterday or last night and today attacked Hudaydah again, the port in Yemen. And so I think that the Houthis are about to be destroyed as well. Yemen will be quite a complicated mess. It too will need to be rebuilt. And so there's going to be, as Ines was saying, the need for commitment by the U.S., by its friends, by its allies, by Turkey, to work together, to hold al-Sharaa to his word, and build the inclusive society that can eventually attract the investment needed to resurrect the Syrian economy. And they'll need to all work together. And I agree that Turkey has suffered huge costs because of what happened in Syria. And part of the problem was the United States' very disingenuous partnership with a terrorist organization, with the YPG.
Ines, if it happens, if there is a situation escalates around Israel and the situation in Gaza, do you think that Turkey will decide to intervene, or more attention to be paid to the situation in Syria?
Well, I think Turkey's side is quite clear. I mean, Turkey is supporting a two-state solution. And it is also in the interest of both Israel and Palestinians. Although Israel is militarily superior to the Palestinians and can do whatever it wants, that doesn't mean that it can get peace and stability by these policies. So rational choice or the policy is a two-state solution, but I don't think Israel is ready for this. So that's why Turkey is supporting Palestinians in their rightful, let's say, demands. Of course, Syria is another case. I mean, a stable Syria is also in the interest of Israel, I think, in the long term. But for this to happen, for let's say, to have a peace agreement between Syria and Israel, then Israel has to also, withdraw from Golan Heights. And that's, I don't think current government in Israel is ready. It's more following of a policy of expansion and occupying new lands and grabbing new lands is in the minds of the Netanyahu government. But if there is a new government or mentality change in Israel, that can change. But I think Turkey's presence in Syria might be considered also as a guarantee for Israel also, because Turkey is a member of NATO, is in alliance with the United States, and Turkey's presence and influence in Syria can also help Israel to achieve a stable order and a peace agreement with Syria in the long term. So that doesn't mean, or that doesn't translate into a threat, that Turkey is present for Israel, let's say, in Syria. But that depends on policies that follow. If Israel decides to stay in Syria, beyond the Golan Heights, that will increase the tensions. That's the main problematic area here. Of course, militarily speaking, Israel can stay there, and they can also occupy more land. But it's talk that if Israel can attack Damascus, I think that will be suicidal. And the current Syrian government cannot attack Israel, but they can defend themselves. And that's, I think, where it will depend on the Israeli policies in the future. If they decide to withdraw and de-escalate the situation, then that will help both Turkey and Israel and everybody to have a stable Syria. Otherwise, things can get out of control, and that will be quite damaging also for Israel, I think.
I can see how Matthew Bryza sometimes do not agree with what you are saying, right, Matthew?
No, I totally agree. I agree 100%. Totally agree.
Well, okay, then I have one more question, which is also, I think, very important for the region. Matthew, what are your expectations from the upcoming visit by the Turkish delegation from the Energy Ministry to Syria, and what areas of energy cooperation do you foresee being discussed in the future?
I mean, it's very early at this point, right? We don't, as Ines was saying, we don't even have, a real state. But for years, there's been interest in a natural gas pipeline across Syria to Turkey. That could be from Israel, from the Leviathan field. It's a project I've worked on in the private sector for many, many years, the one offshore. Problem is it runs into the difficulty, or had run into the difficulty, of governments in Lebanon and Syria and Cyprus who didn't want that project. But if you can do the pipeline from Israel across Syria, or even connecting from further afield from Qatar and across Syria to Turkey, that could be a very attractive investment. Beyond that, I know there's a big need for investment across the board in Syria's energy sector. It's got one refinery that's barely operating. The whole, electricity system needs upgrading. So there's a lot of room for investment, but I would guess the primary focus of those discussions is probably natural gas pipeline to Turkey.
Right, and my last question to you, Ines, how important is a potential energy cooperation between Turkey and Syria, and what benefits could it bring to both countries in terms of energy security and economic stability?
Well, not only energy. Now Syria is a totally ruined country. It needs investment in all kinds of different sectors: energy, infrastructure, and so on. And of course, this gas pipeline is a possibility. I think Turkey will also try to invest and improve the infrastructure in Syria, both roads, highways, and the rail lines. And also, I think Turkey may sign an agreement with regards to exclusive economic zone in Eastern Mediterranean. That will be in the interest of both countries, and that will also change the balance of power in the Eastern Mediterranean. So the regime change in Syria will have lots of repercussions in different fields, and we only start to realize these changes. And I think more surprises, in different sectors will come in the future. But I think Turkey will be playing a positive role in Syria. But of course, Turkey needs partners in this because it's a huge financial burden. And that's why I think Turkey is now investing in diplomatic efforts to try to convince also other actors in the region, but beyond, to in Syria, and that will also be a win-win situation for everybody.
Well, let's see how the situation will be changed. In any case, every single day we can see new developments in Syria. Well, dear experts, thank you so much for joining Inside Politics today. Dear viewers, you watched Inside Politics. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.